for Russian jets closed in on a lone US AWACS aircraft at 31,000 feet. What happened next shook commanders on both sides as this near-combat incident pushed to nuclear powers to the edge. It began early morning on March 14, 2024, when an American E-3 Sentry AWACS, the eye of the U.S. Air Force, was tracking activity over the eastern Baltic Sea. The AWACS carries a huge radar dome on its back, which can scan more than 250 miles in all directions and track up to 600 targets at once. It acts like a flying command center, guiding fighters, warships, and missiles. Because it is so important, the AWACS usually flies with escorts. But on this mission, due to a rotation delay, the aircraft was alone for exactly 11 minutes. Russia saw its chance. At 8:42 local time, 2 Russian Su-35S fighters took off from Kaliningrad, followed by 2 Su-27SMs a few minutes later. Russian radar had spotted the AWACS orbit pattern, and a 4-jet group moved to intercept. The U.S. later called this a coordinated harassment maneuver, meant to test how close Russia could get before triggering a NATO response. The AWACS crew, a team of 18 specialists, saw the incoming fighters at more than 100 miles out. They switched to defensive protocols, locked doors, strapped in, and prepared for possible missile launch warnings. Su-35s can carry the R-77, a medium-range air-to-air missile capable of hitting targets up to 68 miles away. The U.S. aircraft had no air-to-air weapons of its own. If Russia fired, the crew's only protection was to dive, jam, and pray NATO fighters got there in time. At 8:49, the Russian jets reached 40 miles. They spread into a box formation, a tactic used to trap high-value targets. One Su-35 stayed high, another went low, and the 2 Su-27s approached from the rear. The AWACS commander described the moment later. "We were painted from 4 sides. Being painted. Its enemy radar has locked onto you. Assigned missiles could be launched at any second." The U.S. crew transmitted a coded alert to NATO Air Command. This triggered Quick Reaction Alert (QRA) scramble procedures. 2 F-15C Eagles launched from Poland and 2 F-16S from a Baltic base followed seconds later. But they were still 9 minutes away. For now, the AWACS was on its own. The Russian jets closed inside 10 miles, an extremely dangerous distance. At that range, even a short burst from a 30 cannon could rip the AWACS apart. Russian pilots then performed an aggressive pass, crossing in front of the U.S. plane at about 400 knots, forcing the AWACS to hit turbulence. The massive aircraft shook hard. Coffee spilled, gear rattled, but the E-3 held steady. The U.S. crew broadcast a final warning: unsafe, unprofessional behavior. Alter course immediately. Russia didn't respond. Instead, one Su-35 banked left and slid into the AWACS blind zone, an area behind the radar dome where tracking is weaker. This move set off alarms in the cockpit. If Russia wanted to down the AWACS without missiles, this was the perfect spot for a gun run. But the Russians weren't here to start a war. They were here to intimidate, humiliate, and test reactions. For the next 94 seconds, the jets held formation, circling the AWACS like predators around a slow-moving prey. Then everything changed. At 8:57, the first pair of U.S. fighters arrived to F-15C Eagles, built for air-to-air combat and armed with IM-120 AMRAAM missiles. The Eagles locked onto the Russian jets instantly from more than 50 miles away. Their radars lit up the sky. The Russian pilots saw the threat and broke formation. The Su-27s turned south. The Su-35s climbed fast, but the F-15S closed the distance in seconds. Then the second pair of fighters, 2 F-16s, arrived, flanking the Russians from the west. For the first time in the encounter, the AWACS had full protection. NATO had air superiority. At 8:59, the Russian jets received orders from command: disengage immediately. They obeyed. Alpha jets turned toward Kaliningrad and fled at high speed. The U.S. fighters escorted the AWACS to safe territory, holding a defensive perimeter until another patrol arrived. The incident lasted only 17 minutes, but it became one of the closest calls in recent U.S.-Russia air encounters. The Pentagon later released a statement calling the Russian maneuver reckless and unsafe, while NATO warned that one wrong move could have led to a shootdown in a global crisis. Military analysts believe Russia wanted to probe U.S. defenses, force the AWA, said to reveal its radar settings and send a message. We can reach your most important aircraft anytime. But the U.S. response sent a bigger message. You may approach, but you will not control the sky. The encounter ended without shots fired, but the tension remains. As long as both nations fly combat aircraft in the same airspace, one mistake, one misread radar lock, or one nervous pilot could spark a conflict no one can stop. The skies over the Baltic are now watched even more closely, and the AWACS crews continue their missions silent, steady, always ready for the next time Russian fighters decide to test the line.